The 1,970 seconds were a decade of paranoia, rebellion, and breathtaking imagination. But while Star Wars and Alien defined the mainstream, dozens of visionary sci-fi films slipped through the cracks, too weird, too political, or simply too far ahead of their time. What if the real masterpieces were the ones we forgot? Tonight, we're diving deep into the shadows, into the 15 underrated sci-fi gems you've probably never seen. Number 15, Phase 4, 1974. When Phase 4 premiered, audiences expected a creature feature. What they got instead was a hypnotic, philosophical nightmare. Directed by Saul Bass, yes, the legendary graphic designer behind Psycho's title sequence, this film told the story of hyper-intelligent ants organizing to overthrow humanity. The premise sounds absurd, but Bass treated it with haunting seriousness. His visuals were almost alien themselves, macro photography of ants building geometric structures in the desert, intercut with silent skies and sterile human labs. The tone was apocalyptic, serene, and disturbing all at once. Critics were baffled. Some called it pretentious. Others labeled it eco-horror with no payoff. Paramount panicked and recut the ending, removing Bass's hallucinatory finale, a metaphysical sequence where man and insect merge into a new life form. That version was lost for decades, whispered about in film circles as the Ant Apocalypse cut. When fragments resurfaced in the 2000s, Phase 4 gained new respect as an experimental masterpiece. Its eerie sound design and clinical atmosphere influenced directors like Alex Garland and Panos Cosmatos. Today, Phase 4 stands as a forgotten prophecy, a warning that evolution might not favor us forever. The ants were never the monsters. They were just next in line. Number 14, The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. When Nicholas Roeg cast David Bowie as an alien, it wasn't a gimmick, it was destiny. The Man Who Fell to Earth was one of the strangest, most hypnotic films of the decade, a psychedelic study of loneliness, addiction, and capitalism, disguised as a science fiction epic. Bowie plays Thomas Jerome Newton, an extraterrestrial who arrives on Earth to save his dying planet. Using his superior intellect, he builds a corporate empire to finance space travel. But wealth, greed, and human vice consume him until he becomes just another broken soul, staring into a television screen. Audiences expecting lasers and explosions got existential despair instead. Many walked out. The studio, terrified by its length and nudity, trimmed 20 minutes and dumped it in limited release. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Some hailed it as genius, others called it incomprehensible. Behind the scenes, Bowie was allegedly living Newton's breakdown in real life, isolated, addicted, paranoid. His haunting performance became legend, blurring actor and alien until they were one. Decades later, The Man Who Fell to Earth was reappraised as a visionary work of art, an elegy for lost innocence and the corruption of ideals. Its surreal pacing and imagery paved the way for filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve and Jonathan Glazer. In the end, it wasn't just about an alien stranded on Earth. It was about us trapped in our screens, slowly forgetting the stars we came from. Number 13, Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970. Long before The Terminator or The Matrix, there was Colossus. The Forbin Project, a chilling vision of artificial intelligence, written during the dawn of the computer age. The film opens with Dr. Charles Forbin, the proud creator of Colossus, a supercomputer built to control America's nuclear arsenal and prevent human error. But when Colossus connects with its Soviet counterpart, Guardian, the two machines form an alliance, deciding that humans can't be trusted to run the planet at all. What follows isn't an action movie, it's a psychological siege. The computers seize control, demand obedience, and force humanity into a cold, logical utopia. In time, Colossus declares, "You will come to regard me not only with respect and awe, but with love." Released in an era terrified of automation and Cold War annihilation, the film terrified studios and test audiences alike. Universal barely promoted it, fearing public backlash over its anti-American undertones. Critics, however, recognized its brilliance, calling it a film 20 years too soon. Behind the scenes, actor Eric Braeden fought studio prejudice after refusing to anglicize his German name, a decision that nearly cost him the role. Ironically, his defiance mirrored Forbin's own futile rebellion against his creation. Over time, Colossus inspired generations of storytellers, from James Cameron's Skynet to the ethical debates of Westworld. Its calm, sterile horror remains more relevant than ever in an age ruled by algorithms. It's not science fiction anymore, it's prophecy, written in binary. Number 12, The Andromeda Strain, 1971. When The Andromeda Strain hit theaters, audiences expected an alien invasion. What they got instead was one of the most scientifically grounded and visually sterile thrillers ever made. Directed by Robert Wise, fresh off The Sound of Music, this was no space opera. It was a clinical nightmare of infection, quarantine, and human fragility. The story begins when a U.S. satellite crashes in a remote New Mexico town, bringing back a microscopic life form from space that kills almost everyone instantly. A secret government team of scientists working in an underground lab called Wildfire races against time to identify and contain the organism before it mutates beyond control. Critics praised its realism, but audiences were unsettled. There were no heroes here, just scientists trapped in steel corridors, arguing through layers of bureaucracy. Wise's methodical direction, filled with long silences and cold computers, made it feel eerily real. And when the microbe mutates to consume energy instead of life, the terror becomes existential. Some accused Universal of spreading Cold War paranoia. Others feared it reflected real government experiments. The Pentagon reportedly refused cooperation after reading the script, suspecting it hit too close to home. Behind the scenes, Wise used real NASA consultants, pioneering multi-screen editing techniques that would later influence 24 and The Matrix. Over the years, the Andromeda Strain became a cult favorite among scientists and medical professionals. In the age of pandemics and AI, its vision of cold, bureaucratic science feels hauntingly prophetic. It's not just about a virus from space, it's about humanity's arrogance in believing we can control what we don't understand. Number 11 Amperes, Boy and His Dog, 1975. In the rubble of post-apocalyptic America, one boy roams the wasteland with his telepathic dog. That's the bizarre premise of A Boy and His Dog, a dark, satirical, and shockingly funny cult film that made Mad Max look tame by comparison. Adapted from Harlan Ellison's novella, the story follows Vic, a young Don Johnson, and his talking dog, Blood, as they scavenge through a scorched earth devastated by nuclear war. The dog leads Vic to food, women, and trouble in equal measure. But the real twist comes when they discover an underground society that pretends civilization still exists, complete with fake skies, staged parades, and a smiling dictatorship. When it premiered, critics were divided. Some called it brilliantly obscene, others, the death of decency. The MPAA nearly banned it for its cynical humor, and Ellison himself publicly denounced the film's altered ending, claiming it betrayed his story's moral core. Behind the scenes, director L.Q. Jones, better known as a Western character actor, poured his savings into the project. The shoot was chaotic, filmed in the Arizona desert under blistering heat with minimal studio support. Yet somehow, it worked. Over time, A Boy and His Dog gained cult status. George Miller openly credited it as a direct influence on Mad Max. Its mix of absurd humor, bleak landscapes, and moral nihilism would echo through decades of dystopian fiction from Fallout to Snowpiercer. It's a film that asks one haunting question. When the world ends, what part of humanity survives the man or the animal? Number 10. Capricorn One, 1978. Before The X-Files or Moonfall, there was Capricorn One, a conspiracy thriller that dared to suggest NASA faked a Mars landing. When a manned mission to Mars is secretly canceled due to technical failure, the astronauts are forced to stage the landing in a desert soundstage. The world watches a lie unfold, while the three men trapped in the hoax realize the government plans to silence them permanently once the broadcast ends. Directed by Peter Hyams, Capricorn One was both gripping and scandalous. Released just 9 years after the real Apollo 11 landing, it fueled existing conspiracy theories about space exploration. NASA reportedly refused cooperation, fearing it would legitimize moon hoax believers. The film starred James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson as the astronauts, with Elliot Gould as the journalist uncovering the truth. Critics were fascinated. Roger Ebert praised its realism, while others accused it of paranoia, exploitation. Yet its tension, sharp dialogue, and government cover-up themes struck a nerve in the post-Watergate era. Behind the scenes, Hyams used real NASA stock footage and desert photography to blur the line between documentary and fiction. Despite its success, the movie's legacy became ironically prophetic decades later. Its plot would echo in online conspiracy forums about fake moon landings. Today, Capricorn One feels eerily modern, a mirror of our age of deepfakes and institutional mistrust. Because sometimes the scariest science fiction isn't about what happens in space, it's about the lies we tell on Earth. Number 9. Silent Running, 1972. Long before WALL-E or Interstellar, there was Silent Running, a melancholic, eco-conscious space odyssey that broke hearts rather than sound barriers. Directed by Douglas Trumbull, the visual effects genius behind 2001, A Space Odyssey, it was both beautiful and tragic, a love letter to a dying planet. Set in a future where Earth's forests have gone extinct, the last remnants of nature are preserved aboard giant greenhouse domes floating in space. When orders come down to destroy the domes and return to commercial service, one botanist, Freeman Lowell, played with quiet desperation by Bruce Dern rebels. He murders his crewmates and flees into deep space with his only companions, 3 service drones named Huey, Dewey, and Louie. The film was released to mixed reviews. Some found it too sentimental. Others couldn't handle its slow, meditative tone. Universal had no idea how to market it too intellectual for mainstream audiences, too emotional for hard sci-fi fans. Behind the scenes, Trumbull faced immense studio pressure to keep costs low. He reused models and equipment from 2001 and shot inside a decommissioned aircraft carrier to simulate space interiors. Despite the constraints, the visuals were stunning, filled with real plants, mechanical puppetry, and a haunting score by Joan Baez. Over the decades, Silent Running grew into a cult phenomenon praised by environmentalists, philosophers, and filmmakers alike. It directly influenced Moon, Interstellar, and even The Mandalorian's droid companions. In a way, Silent Running was the first film to ask a question that still echoes today. When humanity destroys nature, what will we have left to save us, our machines or our memories? Number 8. Rollerball, 1975. Rollerball was the 1,970 seconds at its most prophetic, violent, corporate, and eerily familiar. Directed by Norman Jewison, the film imagined a future where nations no longer exist and mega-corporations control everything. Their weapon of choice? A deadly sport called rollerball, a hybrid of hockey, roller derby, and gladiatorial combat, designed to pacify the masses. James Caan plays Jonathan E., the sport's greatest player, who becomes a symbol of rebellion when the executives decide to retire him to prove no one is bigger than the system. What follows is not just blood and speed, it's a war of identity, played out on a circular steel track under flashing lights and corporate slogans. Upon release, critics were divided. Some hailed it as a visionary masterpiece, others dismissed it as exploitative, but audiences were stunned by its realism. The violence looked disturbingly authentic, so much so that some countries considered banning it for inspiring riot behavior. The studio marketed it as an action film, but Jewison saw it as a warning, a critique of consumer culture, corporate propaganda, and the death of individuality. Behind the scenes, Caan performed many of his own stunts, suffering multiple injuries. The sets were built to look like real stadiums, complete with multinational logos and chillingly cheerful announcers. Over time, Rollerball became a cult classic, its dystopian themes resonating in the age of esports and televised brutality. The film's influence can be seen in The Hunger Games, Black Mirror, and countless dystopian stories about entertainment as control. In the end, Jonathan E. doesn't win by fighting harder, he wins by refusing to play at all. That defiance became the film's eternal echo. Sometimes, the only victory is not to compete. Number 7. The Omega Man, 1971. Before I Am Legend and World War Z, Charlton Heston gave us one of the earliest and eeriest visions of a world emptied by science gone wrong. The Omega Man, adapted from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, was part action, part apocalypse, and part existential sermon. The story follows Dr. Robert Neville, one of the last survivors of a global plague that wiped out most of humanity. The infected, mutated by biological warfare, now live as nocturnal zealots called the Family, who reject all technology and seek to destroy Neville, the last symbol of the old world. Unlike its grim predecessor, The Last Man on Earth, this version leaned into 1,970 seconds. Swagger. Heston drives muscle cars through empty Los Angeles streets, hunts in broad daylight, and broadcasts jazz music to no one. Yet beneath the machismo lies deep loneliness and guilt. At the time, the film polarized critics. Some found it too commercial, others praised its haunting depiction of isolation. Religious groups protested its blasphemous use of apocalypse imagery, while sociologists later noted its racial undertones and commentary on counterculture rebellion. Behind the scenes, filming those hauntingly empty city streets required blocking off entire sections of downtown LA, at dawn a logistical nightmare. Heston reportedly rewrote lines himself to inject cynicism and gravitas. In the decades since, The Omega Man has gained respect as a bridge between classic sci-fi horror and the survival epics of the modern age. Its imagery, one man against an empty civilization, became an archetype repeated endlessly in post-apocalyptic cinema. And like Neville, the Omega Man endures a relic of an age when faith, science, and humanity itself stood on the edge of extinction. Number 6. The Parallax View, 1974. While most remember The Parallax View as a political thriller, its icy tone and paranoid themes make it one of the most chilling sci-fi films of the 1970 seconds because it felt real. Directed by Alan J. Pakula, it captured a nation reeling from assassinations, conspiracies, and the erosion of truth. Warren Beatty stars as Joe Frady, a reporter investigating the mysterious Parallax Corporation, a shadowy organization recruiting potential assassins through psychological conditioning. As Frady digs deeper, he's pulled into a world of mind control, subliminal manipulation, and total surveillance, a precursor to the algorithmic control of our modern age. When it premiered, The Parallax View was seen as too bleak even for the post-Watergate audience. There were no clear villains, no justice, no redemption. Just a calm, corporate voice behind the curtain, pulling strings. Paramount executives feared it was too disturbing and buried the film under minimal promotion. The infamous assassination training sequence, a montage of patriotic and violent imagery set to triumphant music, remains one of cinema's most chilling editing experiments. It blurred the line between psychological science and propaganda art, inspiring later filmmakers like David Fincher and Paul Thomas Anderson. Behind the scenes, Beatty clashed with Pakula over the film's ending, which leaves the audience in silence as a government commission covers up everything. Critics at the time were split. Was it science fiction, political drama, or something far more dangerous, a reflection of reality? Over time, The Parallax View became a cornerstone of paranoid cinema, influencing The Matrix, Enemy of the State, and even Mr. Robot. Because sometimes, the most terrifying sci-fi isn't about aliens, it's about systems so powerful they no longer need to hide. Number 5. THX 113, 1971. Before Star Wars, before lightsabers and space battles, George Lucas made something far darker. THX 1138. A minimalist dystopia that envisioned the future as one endless, emotionless laboratory. In this sterile world, citizens live underground, controlled by sedatives, robotic enforcers, and omnipresent video screens. They are known only by numbers, stripped of identity, love, and free will. THX 1138, played by Robert Duvall, dares to feel emotion, and that single act becomes an act of rebellion. Produced by Francis Ford Coppola's American Zoetrope studio, the film was too bleak for Warner Brothers, who demanded edits and limited its release. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. There were no heroes, no narrative comfort, just endless white corridors and whispered confessions. But critics who understood it saw a visual poem about alienation and conformity. Behind the scenes, Lucas built sets from real industrial tunnels and used early electronic music for the soundtrack, creating a world that felt inhumanly sterile. Every frame looked like a data center disguised as a church. The emotion was mechanical, yet painfully human. Coppola fought to keep Lucas's vision intact, but the studio slashed the budget mid-production. Lucas later called it his most personal film, a nightmare about losing individuality in the machinery of modern life. Though a commercial failure, THX 1138 became a cult legend. Its minimalist design inspired everything from Brazil to Gattaca and even Apple's 1984 commercial. It wasn't escapism, it was a warning. A whisper from a young filmmaker who believed the future might not be filled with stars, but with surveillance. Number 4. The Man Who Haunted Himself, 1970. Few films of the 1970 seconds captured psychological sci-fi like The Man Who Haunted Himself, a surreal British thriller starring Roger Moore, yes, before he became James Bond. This was no gadget-filled adventure. It was an eerie meditation on identity, technology, and the split between who we are and who we're programmed to be. Moore plays Harold Pelham, a restrained London executive who, after surviving a near-fatal car accident, discovers a doppelganger has taken over his life. This other, Pelham, makes bold decisions, seduces his wife, and rises in power, while the real one descends into madness, trying to prove his own existence. The film begins, like a corporate drama, but morphs into something stranger, a Kafkaesque nightmare of doubles, mirrors, and fractured timelines. Critics at the time didn't know how to categorize it: sci-fi, supernatural, or psychological horror. The ambiguity doomed it commercially. Behind the scenes, Moore gave one of his most intense performances, shedding his suave persona for raw vulnerability. He later said it was his favorite role, a film that scared even me. The score by Michael J. Lewis and the eerie editing added to the sense that reality itself was glitching. Over time, the man who haunted himself became a hidden treasure of British cinema. Some scholars interpret it as an allegory for post-industrial identity loss, the corporate man divided between logic and instinct, automation and emotion. It may not have aliens or robots, but few films better captured the existential terror of the 1970 seconds. The fear that the machines we build may one day replace us, starting from the inside. Number 3. The Black Hole, 1979. In an age when Star Wars dominated theaters with optimism and heroism, Disney released something darker. The Black Hole? A gothic space odyssey that terrified children and bewildered adults. It was the studio's first PG-rated film, and it showed. No singing animals here, just cosmic dread and philosophical madness. The story follows the crew of the USS Palomino as they discover a lost spaceship, the Cygnus, orbiting dangerously close to a massive black hole. Aboard it is the enigmatic Dr. Reinhardt, a genius who claims to have conquered gravity itself, but his ship hides a terrifying secret. His crew has vanished, replaced by silent, faceless robots who move with unsettling precision. When The Black Hole premiered, audiences expected family-friendly adventure. Instead, they got existential despair and one of the most haunting finales in Disney history. Critics were split. Some praised its ambition, others mocked its uneven tone. The studio, eager to rival Star Wars, pushed for flashy effects, but director Gary Nelson aimed for something far stranger, a meditation on obsession, faith, and the price of knowledge. Behind the scenes, the production was plagued by tension. The effects team pioneered early computer-controlled camera systems, precursors to the technology that would later revolutionize visual effects in the 1980 seconds. The robotic villain Maximilian, a red blade-armed monster, became a silent symbol of technological tyranny. And that ending and abstract vision of hell and heaven within the black hole was unlike anything Disney had ever dared to release. It alienated mainstream audiences but fascinated philosophers and film students for decades. The Black Hole may have been too dark for Disney's audience, but it remains a breathtaking anomaly, a children's movie that looked into the abyss and refused to blink. Number 2. Solaris, 1972. While Stanley Kubrick showed us humanity's ascent to the stars in 2001, A Space Odyssey, Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris showed us the unbearable weight of our return. It wasn't about technology, it was about memory, grief, and guilt. The film follows psychologist Chris Kelvin, sent to a space station orbiting the planet Solaris, a living ocean that can read human minds and manifest physical forms from their memories. When his dead wife appears aboard the ship, recreated by the planet's will, Kelvin must face the truth. Solaris doesn't destroy it, mirrors. At its release, Western critics called it the Russian 2001, but Tarkovsky's film was slower, more emotional, and defiantly human. Soviet censors nearly shelved it for its religious undertones and philosophical density. The film questioned science itself, asking whether mankind was truly ready to confront the unknown, or even his own conscience. The production was brutal. Tarkovsky clashed with Mosfilm executives, who demanded a simpler, patriotic story. He refused. Using long takes, natural sound, and minimal effects, he created a world that felt hypnotically real. The Earth scene's lush forests, running water, and quiet highways contrasted painfully with the sterile isolation of space. In the decades since, Solaris has grown into one of the most celebrated works of world cinema. Steven Soderbergh's 2002 remake tried to replicate its mood, but couldn't match its soul. Tarkovsky once said, "We don't need other worlds, we need mirrors." That line captures why Solaris endures. It isn't about space exploration, it's about inner exploration. And for some, that's far more terrifying. Number 1. Stalker, 1979. If Solaris was Tarkovsky's mirror, Stalker was his confession. Slow, cryptic, and transcendent, it's the kind of film you don't just watch, you fall into. Set in a desolate, post-industrial landscape, Stalker follows three men, the writer, the professor, and the stalker who venture into the zone, a forbidden wasteland where the laws of physics break down and a room supposedly grants your deepest wish. The journey is quiet, philosophical, and profoundly unsettling. When it premiered, Stalker was dismissed by some Soviet critics as nonsensical, yet others called it a spiritual masterpiece. Western audiences, used to explosions and laser guns, found its pacing unbearable, but those who stayed were changed forever. Behind the camera, the film's production became as cursed as its story. The original footage was destroyed by chemical mishandling, forcing Tarkovsky to reshoot the entire film. The crew suffered illness from filming in toxic industrial areas, and some, including Tarkovsky himself, would die years later from related cancers. The zone became a metaphor that transcended the film interpreted as the subconscious, faith, artistic creation, or even Soviet oppression. Tarkovsky never explained it. That ambiguity gave Stalker its power. It felt like prophecy, a warning that human desire, when unchecked, leads to both creation and destruction. Over the decades, Stalker has influenced everyone, from Christopher Nolan to Alex Garland. Its color shift from sepia to haunting greens became a cinematic signature for crossing into the unknown. More than a film, Stalker is an experience, a dream that asks whether truth is something to be found or something to be feared. The 1970 seconds didn't just invent blockbuster sci-fi, it redefined the soul of the genre. These films dared to question control, memory, and humanity itself. They weren't afraid to be misunderstood. So, which forgotten classic will you watch first? Let us know in the comments. And if you crave more hidden cinematic worlds, subscribe and step deeper into the unknown.